Welcome back to You Can Understand Shakespeare series, where I am taking you through the works of William Shakespeare, and this one specifically, Romeo and Juliet. There's no need to be afraid of his original language. After all, it is English. There are only three obstacles that really prevent you from understanding what he's saying when you're reading it. Number one, performance. This was made to be performed. You're supposed to watch and listen to professional actors deliver this. Lucky for you, I am a professional actor. Number two, poetry. Sometimes we just don't really get that people are talking in poetry. We expect them to be talking like how we normally talk as we are engaging with one another in our daily lives. Shakespeare doesn't always act that way, and that's okay. It's part of what makes him so great. But we need someone to point out poetry when it shows up for us. And third of all, the biggest P obstacle, prior knowledge. Shakespeare knows more than us. He knows more words. In fact, he invented half of them. He also knows more about history and religion and astronomy and all of these things that he's going to be referencing. Lucky for us, we can always learn more. It's not a deficiency on his part, it's a deficiency on ours. All it takes is a book with some good footnotes. I'm using the Norton Shakespeare, highly recommended, although there are a lot of other good editions, and they all cover different things. But that's also what I am providing for you. A little bit of insight on what exactly he's saying. So let's dive into it with Act 1, Scene 2. This should be a little bit shorter than Scene 1 since there's far less puns occurring. Enter Capulet, that's Juliet's dad, as well as County Paris and a serving man. County just means count. Count as in a title of nobility. So if you think of like Count Dracula, that isn't just a vampire thing. He actually was a nobleman. But let's get into it. Capulet enters and says, "But Montague is bound as well as I in penalty alike." Remember in the last scene, Prince Aeschylus said that if you fight, the penalty is death. So Montague, just like me, is bound in penalty. And 'tis not hard, I think, for men so old as we to keep the peace. Paris agrees. He says, "Of honorable reckoning are you both, and pity 'tis you lived at odds so long. But now, my lord, what say you to my suit?" He's not asking, what do you think about the suit that I'm wearing? He's asking about the case that I am presenting to you. He is pursuing some type of suit with Capulet. He wants something from Capulet. Capulet says, "But saying o'er what I have said before," remember or, O apostrophe ER means over, just in one syllable. "By saying o'er what I have said before, my child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride." Paris wants to marry Juliet. Capulet says, "Hey, she's not even 14 yet. Let's wait till she's almost 16. Paris says, "Well, younger than she, our happy mother's maid." This isn't Paris being creepy. This was more common for women to be married at a younger age back then. Capulet responding to that. "And too soon marred." Marred being disfigured or really that's a good definition for it. They're being disfigured. They're being sort of taken apart. And too soon marred are those so early made. "Earth hath swallowed all my hopes, but she's the hopeful lady of my earth." Keep there that when he says when she's the hopeful lady of my earth, there's a lot of references, especially throughout Romeo and Juliet, about our body being our earth. And that comes from Adam, the first man of the Bible, being made from clay, dust, earth. So she's the hopeful lady of my earth. She's of my flesh and blood. And she is the only child that I have. All of my hopes are in her, which is dramatic irony because we know how this is going to end up. Juliet is going to die. Dramatic irony is when the audience knows something that the characters do not. "But woo her, gentle Paris, get her heart. My will to her consent is but a part. And she agreed within her scope of choice lies my consent and fair according voice." Capulet, pretty great. He says, "Yeah, you win her heart. If she loves you, then you have my consent. I'm not just going to order her to marry." So, hey, awesome, Capulet. We love to see that. He's going to change his tune a little bit later. But for now, we really like it. "This night I hold an old accustomed feast, whereto I have invited many a guest, such as I love, having a party tonight. And you among the store, one more most welcome, makes my number more. At my poorhouse look to behold this night earth-treading stars that make dark heaven light." This is just a poetic image. You're going to see stars that tread the earth, beautiful, radiant women. "Such comfort as do lusty young men feel when well-apparelled April on the heel of limping winter treads." even such delight among fresh fennel buds shall you this night inherit at my house. Here's another. This is a comparison, right? So this is poetic. First of all, when he says the comfort that lusty young men feel, lusty could just be full of life and invigorated, but it also could just mean lusty as we commonly mean it. After all, he's talking about you're going to be looking at ladies. So you're going to feel the comfort that lusty young men feel when well-apparelled April follows limping winter. April is well-apparelled because that's when a lot of flowers bloom and lots of things come out. And limping winter is treading out as the winter leaves. And it's limping probably because winter is usually depicted as old and tired. It's a season of death, whereas how comfortable and how happy we are when spring finally rolls around, that's the level that you're going to feel when you are looking at all of the ladies at my house. You're going to be among fresh fennel buds. Fennel buds, those are buds of fennel flowers, which are commonly associated with marriage. So you're going to say, oh, this is the delight you're going to feel among the fresh fennel buds that you're going to inherit, that's just enjoy, going to receive at my house. Hear all see, ladies, and like her most, whose merit most shall be, which one more view of many, mine being one, may stand in number, though in reckoning none. So he's giving actually sort of the same advice to Paris that Benvolio was giving to Romeo. Go and look at all the ladies and see which one is best. Here he's saying if Juliet is number one, okay, well then woo her, that's great. But make sure, play the field, see if she's actually who you want. Come, go with me, he says to the servant man. Go, Sirrah. Sirrah is an address to an inferior. Just like how we would say sir, we generally use sir just to refer to kind of any guy, but really it should be for someone who's higher class than us, and Sirrah would be for someone who's lower class. We kind of lose that. It's an excellent example of here's just a word that Shakespeare uses quite a bit throughout his text. It's good to remember that Sirrah means someone of a lower class to you. We just don't use it as much. Smarter than we are. He says, go, Sirrah, trudge about through fair Verona. Find those persons out whose names are written here. And he gives them a paper. And to them say, my house and welcome. On their pleasure stay. On their pleasure waits. Here's the party invitation. So he gives it to a serving man. The serving man quotes Capulet, says, find them out whose names are written. Here it is written that the shoemaker should meddle with his yard and the tailor with his last, the fisher with his pencil and the painter with his nets. What's happening here is he's referring to 4 different professions, but switching what they're meddling with. A shoemaker is meddling with a yardstick, and a tailor with his last, which is a shoe form. So the shoemaker has the tailor's equipment, and the tailor has the shoemaker's equipment. The fisher has a pencil, which should belong to the painter. The painter has a net, which should belong to the fisher. He's switching the profession with what is proper to them. And we're about to find out why. He says, but I am sent to find those persons whose names are here writ, and can never find what names the writing person hath here writ. He can't read. So he's saying this is akin to giving a fisher a pencil and a painter a net. You've given me words, I who cannot read. There's a mismatch here. I must to the learned. I must to someone who knows how to read. And that's when Benvolio and Romeo enter. And the servant says, in good time. Benvolio and Romeo are continuing their conversation from the last scene, all about Romeo's lady love. Benvolio says, tut, man, one fire burns out, another's burning. One pain is lessened by another's anguish. Turn giddy, which means turn until dizzy. Turn giddy and be hope by backward turning. One desperate grief cures with another's languish. Take thou some new infection to thy eye, and the rank poison of the old will die. Benvolio is giving him pretty good advice. Essentially, if you have a wildfire, you go ahead, this is actually what they do, and they'll burn out a section ahead of that. So when the fire reaches it, there's nothing for it to consume, and so by one fire, you're burning out another fire. Or he says, by one pain is lessened by another's anguish. If I stub my toe, I'm going to forget about that pain if suddenly I'm shot. He says, take on a new infection to the eye. The eye is the eye that perceives his lady love. So he says, be infected by something new. Find a new lady. What's really interesting is almost all of these are pretty dark and violent and painful metaphors that he's using to refer to love. And a little bit of foreshadowing, and the rank poison of the old will die. The rank poison would be this love sickness that you feel from not being with your love. So if you get a new infection from a new love, you're going to that old poison that's hurting you is going to go away, but it's actually going to be poison that actually kills him in the end. And Romeo responds, your plantain leaf is excellent for that. A plantain leaf was used to dress wounds. You put it on wounds or bruises, and it was thought to have curative powers. And we might say, what does Romeo mean? What does Shakespeare mean? That doesn't seem like it really follows from the advice that Benvolio was just giving. And Benvolio agrees. He says, for what? For what is that plantain leaf excellent? I pray thee, meaning I ask you. He says, for your broken shin. And this is a stage direction. He kicks him in the shin. Why, Romeo, art thou mad? Not mad, but bound more than a madman is, shut up in prison, kept without my food, whipped and tormented. And he sees the serving man. He says, good e'en, good fellow. And e'en is evening. The serving man says, God give good e'en, which is just abbreviations for God give you good evening. I pray, sir, can you read? And Romeo sort of puns on what it means to read. He says, I, mine own fortune in my misery. I can read mine own fortune in the misery that I'm experiencing. The serving man is kind of lost on them. He says, perhaps you have learned it without book. You've learned how to do this without a book. But I pray, can you read anything you see? He's trying to find someone to read the letter. I, if I know the letters and the language. The serving says, ye say honestly, rest you merry. He doesn't get that Romeo is saying, hey, yeah, if I recognize the language, I'll read it. And Romeo, he cuts to the chase. He says, stay, fellow, I can read. And he reads the letter. Now, if you get to this point, you might be going, who are all these people? I don't know any of these people. That's the point. This is a letter of people who are invited to the party. Now, there's a couple little Easter eggs in here, a couple people that we should recognize, and a couple people that we'll come to learn later. So he reads the letter. Signor Martino and his wife and daughters, County Anselm and his beautiful sisters, the lady widow of Vitruvio, Signor Placencio and his lovely nieces, Mercutio and his brother Valentine. Mercutio is going to show up later, friend of Romeo's. Mine uncle Capulet, his wife and daughters, my fair niece Rosaline, Livia, Signor Valencio and his cousin Tybalt, Lucio and the lovely Helena. Tybalt, we should recognize, that's the Capulet who fought with Benvolio in scene 1. Romeo says, a fair assembly. Remember that fair means beautiful, but it also could just mean good. So this is a good assembly. But, as we're going to find out in just a second, it is especially fair because there's one particular person who is attending. No, not Juliet. Romeo doesn't know him yet. But Rosaline, my fair niece Rosaline. Rosaline is who Romeo is in love with, as we're going to find out in just a second. And this is going to be important because that's going to be the bait that draws Romeo to this fateful party. So he asks a fair assembly, where should they come? Servant says, up, which is, come up is an expression of scorn. Up, whither to supper? To our house. Whose house? My master's. Indeed, I should have asked you that before. I should have said, who's your master? Now I'll tell you without asking. My master is the great rich Capulet, and if you be not of the house of Montagues, I pray, come and crush a cup of wine. When you say I pray, that means like I beseech you, I ask you, you are invited. He's not saying, and I pray, okay, God, come and crush a cup of wine. Rather, he is saying, I pray this of you. I pray, come and crush a cup of wine. Rest you merry. Be rested merrily. And he exits. Benvolio sees an opportunity. He says, at this same ancient feast of Capulets, sups like supper, eats the fair Rosaline, whom thou so loves, with all the admired beauties of Verona. Go thither, go there, and with unattainted eye, an eye that has no taint to it, an unbiased eye, compare her face with some that I shall show. And I will make thee think thy swan a crow. Swan, beautiful bird. I'm going to make you think that this beautiful bird is like a crow. There's a little bit of Shakespeare's time and age there, that the white bird is to be denigrated will be like the black bird. But you can think of this more even in terms of like the ugly duckling, how we consider some birds ugly and some birds beautiful. So by comparison, Rosaline is no longer going to seem like the most beautiful lady of all. Romeo says, when the devout religion of mine eye maintains such falsehood, then turn tears to fire. For Romeo, romance is a religion. We're really going to see this later on when him and Juliet confess that they idolize each other. Their romantic love has gone to the point of what should be reserved for God alone. And that's actually what's going to be causing their downfall whenever there's sort of a misprioritization. In this case, they place romantic love above all other loves. So the devout religion of mine eye, the eye that looks at the lady. When my eye believes such falsehood, when Rosaline looks less beautiful than anyone else, then turn the tears that I'm crying in love sickness to fire. And these, my eyes, who often drowned with tears, could never die. They never, my eyes never die seeing that from drowning from my tears. Transparent heretics. They are obviously heretics. Transparent, you can see clearly through. So if I'm being obvious, I'm being transparent. Transparent heretics. Heretics are one who believe a false doctrine, and they would often, ages ago, be burnt at the stake for their heresy. So my eyes would be transparent heretics, and may they be burnt for liars, because they are now seeing something that is not true, that there's someone more beautiful than Rosaline. One fairer than my love? The all-seeing sun ne'er saw her match since first the world begun. Tut, you saw her fair, none else being by. Herself poised with herself in either eye. You couldn't compare to anyone. In both eyes was Rosaline. But in that crystal scales, the eyes, let there be weighed your lady's love against some other maid, that I will show you shining at this feast, and she shall scant show well that now seems best. Romeo says, I'll go along, no such sight to be shown, but to rejoice in splendor of mine own. I don't think you're going to make good on this promise to show me someone more beautiful, but I'll go so I can rejoice to see Rosaline. So they agree to go to this party where Rosaline will be, but also Juliet. And we will cover more of that as we get through the rest of the play. That is the end of Act 1, Scene 2. We will see you for Act 1, Scene 3. Take care.